Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here with you. Glad that you could be with me here on the Oasis, also known as God's Answers for Anxiety and Depression. As always, I wish you a good morning, a good evening, or a good afternoon, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Today I want to, first of all, I want to thank all those who are subscribing. I'm glad that you're here with us. And to remind you that it's important, the two things that are important. Number one, stick with me throughout the whole broadcast, between 15-20 minutes. I try to limit myself to give you some exhortation, some advice, some information that will hopefully be helpful to you in battling anxiety, depression, or other mental health conditions. And also that these broadcasts are just small slices. 15-20 minutes on a YouTube broadcast, it seemed like an eternity, since we are living in an era of little sound bites and audio bites, and everything is kind of quick. As many of you already know, this subject cannot be dealt with in a quick fashion with little hacks and so on. So just a reminder, and especially for the new subscribers, stick with me for the entire broadcast and watch it for as many days in a row. Every day would be, the best. If not, then as many as you can. Notch out that 15-20 minute segment of your day. You don't have to watch it as soon as I upload it. Just give it time, 20 minutes a day, let's say 20 minutes. And then to be there as much as possible every day. And then in time, these lessons will accumulate in your memory, and you'll be able to make progress with the view in mind to find a final cure or final deliverance from your anxieties and depressions and so on. Now, today I want to deal with the subject of discouragement, and who amongst us has not been discouraged. That's just part of life. And I want to say that for those of us who may think, or those of you who may think, that we are facing more difficulties than any other generation, to that I would say that yes, it's true, seem to be more complex and chaotic. But the truth of it is, from the beginning of time, all people have gone through many difficulties in life, and have had to deal with the discouragement that comes along with life. And it comes in all types of ways, over all types of circumstances and conditions. And, it's just something that the average human being somewhere on the planet at any given time is dealing with discouragement. And that may be you today. For those of you who have been with me for a while, you may have watch these broadcasts for a while, then just kind of let them slip. And there could be many reasons for that, but one of them is discouragement. You don't see the type of progress that you wanted to see or hoped that you would see. But always keep in mind that I have shared with you that these resolutions to resolve your issues with anxiety and depression and mental health conditions takes time. It's only natural that when you're in a great deal of distress, mental distress, physical distress, related to nervous symptoms, that you want immediate comfort or immediate deliverance. For example, in trauma cases, something happens, you go to the ER and you're in a ton of pain, let's say from some type of accident. Well, of course you want immediate relief, and even in some of those cases, it's not always possible to get immediate relief. A friend of mine, I was just talking to him this morning. He somehow wrenched his back, and he was in quite a lot of pain. He was telling me about it today, and he went to his doctor, and she prescribed some painkillers as well as some tranquilizers to relax the muscles and so on. Turns out he has a detached rib, so you're going to look for instant or at least to get relief as soon as possible. That's good. The problem with nervous symptoms is that relief doesn't come instantaneously. And then if you have been on the merry-go-round of all types of medications, then they have side effects, and so you're kind of in a rock and a hard place. You take the medications, and they may relieve some anxiety, but they could also produce some other symptoms, and then it's kind of a very difficult situation. So I want to encourage you that discouragement is well, if you look at the word courage, it means you just lack the courage now. And of course, that means you're, though you may want to give up, or some of you may have given up. And that is something that every human being from the beginning of time has struggled with. But I would say even more so for those who suffer from nervous symptoms, that the discouragement can come more frequently than it does with others. And then when you compound it with all of the other issues of life, it can be, kind of a devastating mental frame of mind. I want to read to you something here from the book of Joshua. And when Joshua took over for Moses, he had a very challenging task assigned to him by God. Moses was a very, very well-respected and imposing type of a leader, even though he himself dealt with discouragement. If you read the book of Exodus. And Joshua is given this task to take Moses' place. So naturally it's going to be a bit intimidating, but he was going to be the one that would lead Israel after they had 40 years in the wilderness, wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. He was the one that was to lead them into battle, and not just a battle, but battle after battle after battle after battle to conquer the land. So God instructs him, and I want to read this to you. He says, first he makes a promise. This is Joshua chapter 1. This is verse 5. He promises that there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. So God tells him, I will be with you the whole time. Just the same way I was with Moses, I will be with you. Then listen to the exhortation of verse 6. Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. So now here we have another, not only a promise, but a prophecy. He says, you're going to be the one that's going to divide the land up between the 12 tribes of Israel. And then we have to ask the question, if God has made a promise, in this case to Joshua, and then a prophecy, why would anyone be discouraged? Because that's what comes naturally to all of us. As God is working out a plan in the earth, as God is working out a plan in your life. Since we don't know all the details, Joshua didn't know all the details, Moses didn't know all the details, none of the patriarchs, prophets, or the people of Israel in the Bible, then of course New Testament, same thing. They didn't know all the details, they just knew what God has said. Abraham was told he was going to go and inherit a land, but he didn't know where he was going. So this is the life of faith, and it can gender at moments, and it can be long moments, weeks, months, maybe, of discouragement. So my point is this: if God has already told Joshua, you will conquer the land, I will be with you, the same way I was with Moses, and Joshua was Moses' right-hand man, and he saw the things that God did. Why the exhortation in verse 7? Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. All right. We have a similar exhortation that was given to the Apostle Paul. It's recorded in the book of Acts when he went to the city of Corinth. Jesus tells the Apostle Paul, he says to him, Paul or Saul at the time, don't be afraid, fear not, for I have many people in this city. So this is something the Apostle Paul couldn't see. He felt alone. We have to assume he felt alone. And he was going to be tempted with discouragement, as again, all the biblical patriarchs at one point or another were discouraged. In fact, Joshua, even further on, we would see him giving in to discouragement, and God mildly reprimanding him, exhorting him to say, what are you doing? I told you I would be with you. But God knows our condition, that it's frail and that we have limited strength. You know, some are stronger than others. Obviously, some are weaker than others. But we all have our limitations. God, thankfully, has no limitations. So he tells Joshua, now look, you're going to go in and you're going to conquer the land, and you're going to be the one that will divide the land for an inheritance to my people. But make sure that you're strong and you're courageous. And he repeats this. Look at verse, well, I got the Bible open, maybe you don't. Verse 9, have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. So not just once, but here, first the exhortation is verse 6, be strong and of a good courage. Then in verse 7, be strong and very courageous. And then in verse 9, have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage. So God is repeating this. You see, obviously God knows, even though God has promised, Joshua is an extraordinary man of faith. He and Caleb were the only two that came out of Egypt and then went into the promised land, so-called promised land of Canaan, which eventually would become the nation of Israel. The others that were the same age and had the same deliverance from Egypt that Joshua and Caleb did, never made it. They literally died in the wilderness for their lack of faith and their unbelief. And before any of us, we get too hard on them and say, oh, if I was there, I would certainly believe. Let's be reminded of this. We turn the pages of a Bible and we already know what the outcome is. They did not. Now, we transfer that to your life. And you have many, many promises in the Bible. And most of you know what those promises are. But it's in between. When the situation looks really bleak. And then you read the promise, but your feelings, your sensations, your impulses, your thoughts are all speaking against that promise, because you're saying, this is not going well. This is not, I don't see the promise. I don't have the peace. I don't have the joy. I don't have the strength. But this is why we must really look at discouragement and address it, because it's something that's common to all of us. Every human being builds up habits. And habits, bad habits, can be very, very stubborn and difficult to break, especially when it's in the mind, the way we think. An event, a thought. An event, a thought, same event. A thought, same event. A thought, same event. A thought. Then you build up a pattern of thinking. And this is what happens with nervous symptoms, nervousness, fear, sadness, depression, is that there's a pattern of thinking in responding to some type of an event or events. And that's what has to be broken. The mentality of the mind has got to change. And this, as I tell you all the time on this broadcast, this is not easy to do. And the reason I keep repeating it is so that you don't get discouraged. So you don't think, oh, everybody else is doing so well, why aren't I doing well? And the truth of it is, look, at people, all of us can put on a smile when we're not actually happy. We all can be polite even though we're sad, and this type of thing. But the truth of it is, every single person, myself included, we all deal with discouragement. Why should I even bother with this anymore? Why should I do this? Why am I doing this? And this is where our faith in God's word, what God has said, is tested. And here's the other thing. God tests every single one of his children. And remember this too. God is testing us for our benefit so that we, as the book says, can be a partaker of his holiness, so that we can get the actual benefit. But in between the promise and the fulfillment of a promise, in your case, peace, being delivered and relieved of all your symptoms, can take a while, and it's a long process. And in between, again, the symptoms return. You thought they were gone, and panic attacks seem worse than ever, because you were free for a while, and then all of a sudden they came back and they were worse than ever. At least that's your perception. It's not always true. And so what happens is you get discouraged. You quit. You give up. I have never read of anybody ever, inside the Bible, of course, even outside the Bible, who didn't start out on some task, even without a promise from God, didn't start out on some task, and then somewhere along the line become discouraged. And in most cases, it's a frequent discouragement, frequent setbacks, frequent questions that come into the mind is this really going to work, and all of this. And I know that there are at least some of you, if not many of you today, that are dealing with discouragement. Life is just handing us a lot of occasions to be discouraged. And so it takes a lot of fortitude. And I talk a lot about this on the channel here. 2, discipline. It takes discipline. But that's not what we want. As human beings, we want relief, and we want it now. We want things to change, and we want them to change today. Now, like I said earlier, sometimes that can be accomplished in certain areas of life, but in life in general, it's always a developing story. It's always a work in progress. And so discouragement becomes one of the number one enemies of good mental health, and of ridding yourself of the anger and the fears and the hatred and all of these things. Discouragement becomes enemy number one, because once you're discouraged, and if you quit, it's a guarantee that you lose. Just think of any game that you could play or have played. When you quit, it's really game over. Simple. But you say, hey, Pastor, I'm so much up against it. I just don't know that I can go much further. Believe me, I know what you're talking about. I know that feeling. But you cannot allow yourself to be overwhelmed to the point that you give up. Don't give up. Don't give in, because to do so is a guarantee that you can't accomplish the goal. That's just common sense. So this is my exhortation to you. Discouragement is common, especially with nervous symptoms. Discouragement is common in any walk of life when you're looking for a better outcome than the one that you have presently. Discouragement is something that every single human being has to face. And the ones that win are the ones that refuse to quit, refuse to give up. And the ones that lose, well, they are the ones who let discouragement take over, and they just stop trying. So don't let discouragement take you out of the game. Don't let discouragement take you off the mark. The Apostle Paul said, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And you should do the same. In the end, if you are diligent, disciplined, and refuse to give in or refuse to give up, you're going to have success, just like God said to Joshua, and he did have success. Let me pray for you today. So, Father, I pray for my friends. I ask you to encourage those that are discouraged, give courage to those that are discouraged, and cause them, no matter how weak they feel at the moment, no matter how frustrated and sad or anxious, Let them have the peace of Christ with the assurance that if they continue on, eventually they will have success. All right. That's my exhortation for you today. I hope that you take it to heart. Don't let yourself be discouraged. And don't give up. And don't give in. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, as several people have subscribed over the last couple of months, we'd love to have you in this rather small group at the time. And all you have to do is just, boom, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you're good to go. As always, I appreciate a thumbs up if this has helped you, and I hope that it does. All right, so God willing, I will see you here tomorrow on the Oasis, and until tomorrow, remember, don't give up, don't give in, and may the peace of Christ be with all of you today. God bless.